Hello YouTube, it's me again, Maho Point. I recently made a cry for help video regarding Backlog Year 5, where I talked about falling back on comfort games during the last 3 years of my backlog. So let's talk about these games, and how they are endlessly eating away at my time, and taking away from what games I would normally be playing if I felt more motivated, and how they fit into my definition of a comfort game. Monster Hunter Rise. We're setting the bar about what to expect when it comes down to what I mean by comfort. I think I mentioned in my last video that comfort games can mean many things, but it usually boils down to games that I personally find comfortable to pick up and play. And Monster Hunter Rise fits that bill. It's not too cozy and actually a bit stressful to play at times, which is why it's the lowest on this list, but it's high enough that I've replayed it and picked it up multiple times, more times than Animal Crossing, mind you. As for those uninitiated, before I talk about Rise specifically, I have to talk about Monster Hunter. Monster Hunter is relatively, and I mean this in the most endearing way possible, an intentionally clunky sort of game with deliberate movement. It is a resource management game, a hack and slash game, a fighting game, and a boss gauntlet game, all rolled into one neat little package. This is the most succinct way I can describe it without this video going on for too long, so take that as you will. Anyways, Rise has better player mobility options, getting rid of some of the clunkier aspects of the game, cozier feel to its world and settings, and has needlessly punishing boss monsters that require a mastery of the mobility options in the game, with a tier system that drastically ranks up the difficulty of monsters as you progress through the ranks. Overall, Monster Hunter Rise, while not being on my list of favorite games of all time, it's definitely one of the more game-like games of all time, and I much prefer the regular arcade style of the standard Monster Hunter games compared to the Monster Hunter World. Monster Rancher series. Oh boy, do I love raising me some monsters. Monster Rancher is what it says on the box. You raise monsters on a farm, one at a time. Much unlike Pokemon. However, you must raise your monsters to become stronger in order to beat tournaments in the arena depending on the week of the month. These earn you cups and items that have boons for helping you raise your monsters easier and increasing their lifespan by a smidge. I am not good at the Monster Rancher series, and while I understand there are optimal raising regimens, I just like seeing what works based on what I got for the first couple of years, until I got a good cash flow. Then I take the training regimen into account so I can beat the game. But I do admit, experimenting is a lot more fun than following guides for this game. Guides essentially break the game a bit, but can also be a bit fun when you feel like turning off your rank and seeing what happens with your monster. There are also optional dungeons to crawl through, but these are over-the-top board game-like setups, unlike the RPGs you're probably used to. I think Monster Rancher is a pretty fun and safe game for scratching that gacha itch if you have one. Twinkle Star Sprites. I can't count the amount of times I beat this game. Twinkle Star Sprites is a versus mode arcade shmup, a shoot 'em up, in which both players try to survive an onslaught of enemies but have to take down the opponent by sending garbage projectiles careening into their half of the screen, by racking up combos. It's also the first game I've seen where a boss acknowledges how many continues to use. Yeah, there's a character that predates Sans. The OST is extremely comforting and the sprite work is excellent for a 90s game. The story mode is relatively short and I highly recommend it. The World Ends With You, Final Remix. Okay, I know people have problems with the tabletop version of these games. I understand it has its flaws as an owner of the original and the remake, but the music selection expanding upon the DS version of the game, and this one actually being easy to record are bonuses in my book. The World Ends With You is a story-based action RPG by Square Enix, has you collecting pins in order to use your psychic powers, psychs, in order to take down the enemies, noise they are called, plaguing society. These pins are addicting to collect and evolve, and lent into a Pokemon-like habit to try out everything in order to utilize them to their fullest potential. I call this Pokemon-like phenomena the otaku-collect genre, a combination of otaku, a previously derogatory yet reclaimed term used to refer to nerds, specifically those with a collection habit, and collection, as Pokemon-like has fallen out in favor of more general terms like monster raising or unit raising. But I'm going off on a tangent. The thing I like most about this game in particular is the music and style, and chapter replayability. This is probably the most accessible modern RPG in terms of just having the ability to play it over and over again. Difficulty settings aside. If you haven't played The World Ends With You, our final remix, I recommend picking it up. It's number 6 on my top 20 games of all time list. ZHP, Zeta Hero Project, The Unlosing Ranger vs Dark Death Evil Man. I have talked about this game at length on a previous video, which is my favorite game of all time. And yet it's number 6 here. Why? Why? Well, if I played a game too much, I'd probably be sick of it, but that's a topic for another day, probably. ZHP is a roguelite RPG. Games that are more accessible and approachable versions of a roguelike. Games that tend to feature permadeath, item loss, and other such conventions. What makes ZHP so replayable is its multiple endings and mystery dungeons. I just can't put it down. Each run of the game is randomized, while the story remains static, so there's always something to see or encounter, while the story remains the same. The story itself is very inspiring and hilarious. I recommend picking up if you haven't yet. Prinny, can I really be the hero? If you were to start out with 1,000 lives, what is your expectation? The game is probably going to be really hard, right? Prinny, can I really be the hero? Has to be one of the more punishing platformers I played. Prinny is a side-scroller with a hilarious story. The Prinnies, the souls of sinners who are reborn in the Netherworld to pay off their sins through hard labor, are tasked with getting Etna, the previous overlord of the Harl's vassal, the Ultra Dessert. This game takes place after the normal ending of the Sky one, which is essentially the bad ending. The game has intentionally clunky controls reminiscent of Ghosts and Goblins, where jumps are committed to once executed. You must fight through quote-unquote 10 hours of the game in order to complete its story. Each selection of a stage is 1 hour, and you must complete the game within this amount of time. If you back out of a stage because you were over your head, this counts as an hour lost, so make sure to make your selections wisely. Each hour will increase the difficulty of a stage by a set amount, capping anywhere between 4 to 7 stars by the end of the game. Furthermore, bosses and stages will shift around depending on the hour or difficulty of the game at the time. There is also a hidden Asagi mode that can be accessed by either completing stages at the hub world or entering a button input at the title screen. All in all, there are about 52 stages, including the DLC. You can probably see why I like this game already, but if it wasn't obvious, it changes each time you play it. No two runs are the same unless you select the same sequence of stages each time. This game is also slightly easier than its second, Dawn of Operation Panties, I found, and has much less embarrassing titles, so I recommend it over the sequel.
Gotta have guts, dude!
The Sonic series. Well, yes, I do find myself not being able to pick which one of these games in the last several picks that I tend to focus on. Thanks for noticing. I'm not going to go over in depth about why this particular game series as a whole keeps reeling me back in, because covering every individual game would be exhausting. And you're not here for that, are you? Instead, I'll just list the games I go back to the most and explain my reasoning. Sonic 2. This was my first Sonic game, and the first game I ever beat, with cheats. While I won't say I mastered the game, I have been able to collect every emerald on stage 1 in one go before, and the more accessible versions in the Sonic Origins collection are a nice addition. I like going back for nostalgia, personally. Sonic CD. I used to play this game a lot on PC. There was a time I had very little privacy due to my move to Texas when I was a teenager, so I spent a lot of time just trying to get good at the game. The Origins collection is my favorite, even though the Whitehead version has better UI. You just can't beat stage replayability. Especially special stage replayability. The Mega Man Battle Network X and Zero series. Rather than describe all series here that I tend to focus on, I'm just going to go over which games I find myself coming back to over and over and why. Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. Yes, the entire collection. Collecting, trading, battling, what is not to love about this? It's the perfect port. If there was only more people who would pick up this version of the game so I could battle them. It's nice to have everything safe as a save in one package and have it backed up. It's a perfect title. Mega Man X. I'm so good at this game that I do uncharged runs now. What was once a seemingly impossible game for me as a preteen is now just something I do every other Tuesday. Go figure. Mega Man Zero Collection Easy Scenario / Ultimate Mode. Listen, I have S ranked these games, but sometimes you just want to breeze through and feel overpowered without having to worry about collecting anything. And the Easy Scenario and Ultimate Modes are my favorite ways to play. The Pokemon series. I am not explaining the appeal of Pokemon, but I find myself going back to these particular modes in these particular games. Red, Blue, Yellow / Let's Go, Story Mode. I just replay the story mode on these games whenever possible. If I have time, I will just reboot my save from the start to see how far I can get before becoming bored with the game again. Sword and Shield, Max Raids, Isle of Armor, Crown Tundra. Max Raids were addicting when the ecosystem was populated with players at least. I had fun strategizing exactly which Pokemon had multi-hit moves that could hit for bigger damage after the shield broke. BDSP, the Battle Tower and the Underground. Battle Tower is one of my favorite facilities, it lets you try new strategies without becoming too overwhelmed. And the Underground is just pretty much kind of fun to explore. Scarlet and Violet, 7-star Max Raids, online global competition. 7-star Max Raids are probably my favorite feature of all time. I love prepping new Pokemon to take down raid bosses, and it's fun strategizing or building which creatures are most optimal. The Gunvolt series. Oh Gunvolt, how I love the way you marry the sensibilities of Mega Man Zero and Toho. Gunvolt is a perfect game series for side-scroller lovers, and has an easier and more accessible skill floor than Mega Man. In fact, if you want to get into Mega Man, and never have before, I recommend playing Gunvolt 3, as it is less punishing than most of those games, and will ease you into the concept of running and shooting if you aren't familiar with it. Despite not explaining the last couple of games, I will explain this one, as it's relatively newer, and mostly little-known series compared to the previous entries. Gunvolt is a story-packed, side-scrolling game where characters banter on screen while you try dodging and shooting. It's closer on difficulty to the Mega Man Zero series, but thanks to Evasion, an ability that lets you have the probability of automatically dodging incoming attacks if you get hit, you won't take too much damage, as long as you remember to ground yourself frequently. Gunvolt is a series where you take control of the titular character Gunvolt, or his rival Kopin, or the main character of Gunvolt 3, Kieran, and run and shoot. The writing and localization is top-notch for the most part, and the music and graphics? If there was a notch over the top, the entire series would go there. Yes, I do find myself repeatedly playing all of these games to perfect score ranks. Pick up these titles, you won't be disappointed. Honorable mentions. Disgaea, for its thousands of levels worth of grinding. Kirby series, for how easy it is to replay. Animal Crossing, New Horizons, for just being a pretty cozy game to return to on occasion. And there you have it, my reason for procrastinating on my backlog. A whole bunch of really addictive comfort games that I hope you guys will check out someday. I want to hear what kind of games you guys are playing to procrastinate with your backlog down in the comments if you can. I might look at them if I have time. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice day. Bye.